Betrayal is something you expect from a villain, but not from a hero, and yet how many times have the Avengers been betrayed by heroes? How many times by other Avengers even? Avengers Disassembled is one of the most iconic betrayals of all times when it comes to the Avengers. It all went down when Wanda turned evil. One of the times she turned evil, as that's actually happened a few times in the comics. Why did she turn evil this time? This time it was not due to Chthon, but instead due to a psychotic break, all thanks to her learning the truth about what had happened with her fake children, who weren't even quite so fake as we even thought, to be honest, as Billy and Tommy are now alive and well in the comics, and while they're not Wanda's biological children, they are her spiritual children, so there. But I digress. As a result of this break, Wanda turned on her friends and teammates, the Avengers, killing her husband Vision and using him as a weapon against her friends, disguising the attack as one coming from Ultron when in truth she was actually behind all of this. There were casualties, and during Avengers Disassembled, heroes and characters we'd read for years as member of the team were actually lost to us. So it's pretty traumatic. This next betrayal is honestly nuts, and for this one we have to travel a far distance, all the way to the alternate reality of Earth 1610, known as the Ultimate Universe, or the old Ultimate Universe now, because now we have the Ultimates, but it's a new universe. Here, Black Widow betrayed Hawkeye, Iron Man, and pretty much all of the Avengers when she was revealed to be secretly working with the Liberators and Russia. Surprise, surprise, the Russian spy turned out to be a Russian spy. Next up, Avengers vs. X-Men is one of those events that was both frustrating at times while also being kind of genius. When you think about it, there had always been some weird unspoken thing between the X-Men and the Avengers, and not the kind of unspoken thing MCU Star-Lord suggested had always been between him and Gamora. We're talking about an unspoken sort of rivalry, or perhaps I should say a resentment. And because it had been long unspoken and only ever really implied due to the separation between these two superhero teams throughout the years, it wasn't surprising that the Avengers felt betrayed by the X-Men when they basically offered to help with the Phoenix Force and were rebuked by the X-Men team. The Avengers felt the Phoenix was a global threat, but the X-Men saw the Phoenix Force as a potential savior for them, someone who could maybe help in returning mutant kind's numbers after the loss of all those mutants during Endgame. Really, what this conflict was actually about was the years of animosity between these two teams, where the X-Men had often felt abandoned and given the cold shoulder by the Avengers. And to be fair, I kind of feel the X-Men perspective on this, but I would as someone who's more of an X-Men fan than an Avengers fan. In this next one, when the zombies come a-running and a-eating, of course the Avengers will be betrayed. Where to start with this one? Well, there are multiple moments that I could choose from in the Marvel Zombies universe when it comes to the Avengers being betrayed, but I think one of the most despicable for me is the betrayal of Black Panther. Black Panther, who has been an Avenger in the main continuity and even a leader of the Avengers at one point, is tragically tricked by his colleague and good friend Hank Pym in this universe. This is after Hank Pym has become infected. Still able to pass as human for the time being, Hank knows he's going to be starving as a result of the virus that's working its way through his system, and tricks Black Panther into a trap so that he can basically slowly feed off of him. It's about as gruesome as it sounds. In this next one, Age of Khonshu was a really cool storyline that took place within the Avengers series and also helped to inform the Moon Knight series that launched shortly after in 2021 as written by Jed MacKay. The story in Avengers though was written by Jason Aaron. The idea here was that Moon Knight was messing up all the Avengers individually and taking from them instruments connected to their power. While it initially seemed like a pretty big betrayal, to be honest, it was later revealed that Moon Knight was actually doing this at the behest of Khonshu, who in turn was preparing for a final standoff against Mephisto. However, Mark struggles during the story when he feels that Khonshu is taking things too far, and he begins to question the morality of his own actions as Khonshu's avatar. He eventually decides to turn on his god, using the power he's been imbued with to defeat him. Despite the betrayal, the Avengers ultimately decide to forgive Moon Knight since he's seen the error of his ways, and even offer him a spot on their team, although Moon Knight ultimately chooses to decline their offer. And then Khonshu basically gets locked up in a prison. Some betrayals aren't as clean cut. There isn't always a good and bad side when it comes to
2018's War of the Realms is one of the most refreshingly good Marvel comic book events. It brought the Thor run at the time to an awesome end, with Malekith, King of the Dark Elves, invading the Earth with a coalition of villains. One member of Malekith's Dark Council of Villains was the adopted brother of Thor, Loki. Loki kind of toes the line between villain and hero, and here it's no different, as he was technically working as a double agent for Asgard on this Council of Villains. But Malekith knew that he couldn't trust Loki at all, and so he sent assassins to take Loki out, who obviously survived because he has the power of popularity. But Loki's real moment to shine came courtesy of his own father, Laufey. As part of Malekith's invasion force, Laufey and his frost giants invaded Earth, and a large group of Asgardians and Earthlings came to stop them. When Laufey grabbed up Loki's new mom, Freya, Loki was all like, "Nuh-uh," and he cut off Laufey's giant hand. Loki then gives Freya some info about Thor's whereabouts before completely gobbled up by Laufey. But that's not the end. Fast forward from issue 1 where this happens all the way to the last issue in the event, and Daredevil, who has become this awesome god of fear, chucks Heimdall's blade, Hofund, into Laufey's mouth, and Loki, who had been alive this whole time, uses it to cut his way out of Laufey's insides. It's so cool. Now, most people recognize the Thunderbolts team as a group of villains and anti-heroes coming together to fight the good fight. Melissa Gold, who goes by the superhero alias Songbird, was one of the Thunderbolts' first members. Melissa had vocal cord-based sound abilities that were later replaced by a set of vocal cord implants that allowed her to do a whole bunch of things like generating powerful sonic blasts, sonic force fields, influencing others with high-pitched sonic vibrations, and even creating solid objects from sound, including wings, which were super cool. She became a prominent member of the Thunderbolts, which itself was at first actually just a front for Baron Zemo and his new Masters of Evil, pretending to be superheroes while they planned world domination. But turns out Melissa and most of the other Thunderbolts actually kinda grew to be pretty satisfied playing as heroes. Songbird, Meteorite, Jolt, Mach 1, and eventually Atlas began to truly grow into their own, and ultimately, the Thunderbolts completely turned against Zemo, stopping him and rescuing the Avengers in the process. They then became an actual vigilante group, at least for a while. Next up isn't so much of a betrayal as it is a minor mind control that resulted in a really cool moment. Taking place in Action Comics 892, Lex Luthor has picked up Black Lantern energy in the Arctic Circle, and he hires Deathstroke to come along as some added security. Unfortunately, when Deathstroke goes to investigate the Black Lantern energy, he ends up being corrupted, and Lex Luthor is forced to don his battle armor and hold off Deathstroke as long as possible. This is such a cool fight because even if it's kind of short-lived, it just puts two people against each other that you know you want to see. It's pretty awesome and somewhat close. Even though Luthor's strength is greater with his suit, Deathstroke is a combat genius and he's fast as hell. With Deathstroke being able to get Lex with more than a few good hits, and thanks to the Black Lantern energy affecting Lex as well, Deathstroke very nearly takes Lex's life, only to be brought back to his senses at the very last minute. Luckily, it only results in an understandable pay cut for Deathstroke. Now, coming up in our runner-up spot, when us comic book nerds were first introduced to Harley Quinn way back in Batman the Animated Series, she was pretty much just the Joker's love interest and a sidekick. But since then, her character has gone through some dramatic changes. A big part of why that happened is because it's pretty damn clear that the Joker only really cares about himself and has never truly cared for Harley Quinn. Their relationship is toxic with a capital T and is not something for anyone to idolize, even though that happened for a little weird while there. So it was actually super refreshing to finally see her stand up for herself in Harley Quinn issue number 1 from 2000. When Harley breaks her hubby bubby boo out of Arkham Asylum, her friend and eventual romantic partner, Poison Ivy, pays her a visit to deliver some harsh truths about her relationship with the Joker and how he is no bueno for the Quinzel. While she is characteristically initially in denial, Harley is eventually forced to admit that she was wrong about the Joker after he shoots Poison Ivy, who had disguised herself as Harley Quinn. She then defends Ivy from Joker's goons before actually trading blows with Joker himself, and even though she almost falls for his lies multiple times during that fight, by the end of the comic, she kicked the Joker to the curb, at least for a little while. And finally, for a little while now in the X-Men comics, mutants have found a home on the sentient island of Krakoa, with all mutants, good guys and bad guys, being offered sanctuary and a fresh start on this new nation. One longtime X-Men villain, Mr. Sinister, happened to have a genetic database that became a crucial part for the mutant resurrection protocols, and so Mr. Sinister was welcomed not only to live on the island, but also to join the Quiet Council, ruling over Krakoa. He began leading the Hellions, or Helions, or whatever you want to call them, and seemed to be actually looking out for Krakoa's interests. No, he wasn't. Enter the sins of Sinister's story and timeline. After Emma Frost revealed that Moira McTaggart has actually always been a mutant with the ability to reset the timeline upon her passing, Sinister immediately gained a sample of her DNA DNA and created the Moira engine, which was basically just a bunch of Moira clones. When he activated a clone's X gene, it created a save point in the timeline so that if events ever went against Sinister's plans, he only needed to upload his knowledge into the clone and destroy it, which reset the timeline and allowed him to begin fresh with even more knowledge. He managed to corrupt every mutant with his own DNA, putting them under his control, and he eventually conquered the Earth and very nearly almost achieved godhood. Number 10, Batman. Sort of. Now, I don't really consider what Batman did here to be a betrayal. In fact, if you know Batman, then you shouldn't be surprised that he had a list of protocols in place to take on his own allies in the Justice League. As this list proves, superheroes don't always stick within their altruistic sensibilities. Things happen. Good guys go bad. People get mind controlled or possessed. This is comic books we're talking about, for goodness sake. But the problem comes when an incredibly capable villain named Ra's al Ghul gets his hands on Batman's list of ways to take down the Justice League. Then things get a little out of hand, and it results in the JLA story of the Tower of Babel. Sure, the bad guy was stopped, but it didn't change the fact that the League held resentment over Batman for this. Number 9, Iska. Iska is a jerk. Plain and simple. A sore loser, some could say, except the problem is she never loses. It's literally her power. Almost like how Domino has the ability of luck, Iska has the ability to always win. And that even means she completely switches sides when her power tells her the side she's on is going to lose, which is just kinda super unfair. Number 8, Omni-Man. This one isn't crazy unexpected since it happens pretty quickly in the story, but well, I watched the show before I read the comics, and when Omni-Man turned around and brutally decimated the whole of the Guardians of the Globe, I sat there with my mouth wide open. It's possibly one of the biggest reasons I quickly ran and read the whole series. You see, Omni-Man is at first presented as the closest thing to Superman in the Invincible universe. He is set up as the world's strongest hero, hailing from an empire of just human-like aliens called Viltrumites. And then, all of a sudden, the Viltrumites are the biggest threat to the universe, being brutal and desperate conquerors, with Omni-Man sent to Earth to judge the planet's viability as the new Viltrumite breeding ground and then take it over for the Empire. Unlike other Superman but bad characters, one of the central conflicts behind this story is the father-son relationship between Omni-Man and his son Mark, or Invincible. And the whole thing was just an awesome twist that you don't expect until it happens. Number 7, Ikaris of the Eternals movie. This one came as a bit of a surprise for me. I read the Eternals comic as a kid, and Ikaris was the greatest among them. He was cool, if not a little basic, but he wasn't a traitor, so it was almost a pleasant surprise to see the MCU go the route of making him betray his fellow Eternals. I think it made the story just a bit more interesting. Basically, Ikaris learned of his true purpose: to protect the human race, to prepare for the birth of the Celestial growing inside the Earth. His fellow Eternals, including their leader Ajax, however, had grown attached to humanity, and so Ikaris made the decision to betray them, causing Ajax's death and trying to bring the successful birth of Tiamat the Celestial. It was an interesting change that some people may have liked and others may have hated, but it happened all the same. Number 6, Robot. Going back to the Invincible series a bit more, but way further down the line, with the hero known as Robot. For most of the series, the super genius known as Robot had been a very helpful ally to Invincible and the world, and even when he flips to become the final antagonist of the comic, he still seems to be trying to help the world. Rudy here is a literal super genius. Like, I'm talking he invented a robotic cat that was super popular in Japan at the age of 3. Robot had an overarching plan that he was slowly working towards. All of his actions were in service of his ultimate goal. He got himself a new cloned body, he got together with Monster Girl, he went off-world with her, overthrew an empire and began ruling it, and eventually he took over the Earth using his robotic drones, using them to do multiple tasks all at the same time, like talking to the Viltrumites, fighting the Earth's superheroes, and meeting with the president, all for the greater good of the Earth and the human species, creating a utopian society. He convinces a lot of people he's right too.
Number 4, Hydra Captain America. The Hail Hydra reveal from Captain America Steve Rogers 1 shook the internet. If you were a Marvel fan in any capacity, even if you just liked the MCU, you heard about this. I mean, when the guy famous for fighting against the evil side of World War II suddenly supports their Marvel Universe counterpart, it's gonna get people talking. Not only was Steve betraying all his allies in universe with this, and also everything else that he stood for, but also the fans that grew up loving him and everything good that he stood for. In the end, it was revealed that Steve Rogers, as we know him, didn't say this. It was was actually an evil Steve, Flag Smasher, that was put in his place. This was also the story where Phil Coulson was betrayed and eliminated. Deadpool is a huge Captain America fan, follows him blindly, and he proved this in the second issue. Coulson realized that there was something seriously wrong with Steve, and evil Steve can't have anyone suspecting him, so he sent Deadpool to eliminate Coulson, telling the Merc that he had gone rogue. Of course, Deadpool would do anything for his hero, and he did the job, much to the dismay of fans. Number 3. Talia was behind Damian Wayne's demise. Damian Wayne's own mother is the reason why he met his end before he even hit high school. Talia al Ghul is Damian's mother, and she is not always a good mom. She is kind of working with what she got after being raised by Ra's al Ghul, but I still simply can't imagine putting a $500 million bounty on your own son's head. That is truly bananas. She was doing it to distract Batman from like something else in the storyline, but like $500 million? With the people operating in the DC universe, it is a miracle that Damian made it as far as he did. Further than that, Talia conceived Damian with Bruce on purpose to gain a level of control over him. She sent Damian to Bruce for the same reason. She didn't anticipate that Damian would actually want to stay with his father more and reject her. Scorned, she created a clone of Damian called Heretic. If you thought Damian was raised to be an elimination machine, nothing on Heretic. Heretic was sent to fight the Bats and in the end eliminated little Damian, so technically Talia is responsible for her own son's demise. She was at least upset with Heretic for making the move when she didn't tell him to do that, but like, girl, we never even should have gotten to that point. She is one character whose personality does wildly swing depending on who's writing, because sometimes she places a bounty on her son's head, and then sometimes she kisses it. It really depends. Number 2, M-Day and Avengers Disassembled. Scarlet Witch losing her magically generated children caused way more problems than the casual Marvel fan realizes. Wanda lost her mind after losing her kids. She tore apart the Avengers in what is known as Avengers Disassembled, and later eliminated an entire genre of the human race in what is known as M-Day, and both events are directly linked to the loss of Wiccan and Speed. In Avengers Disassembled, the team is attacked by reanimated corpses that detonate, resulting in the destruction of the Avengers Mansion and some Avengers. The attack causes She-Hulk to lose it, and in her crazed state, she tears Vision apart and sends other teammates to the emergency room. And finally, Hawkeye ends up sacrificing himself to save his friends. At the end of it all, the Avengers found out that their own teammate, the Scarlet Witch, was behind it all due to being driven mad by loss. And then all of this directly led into the events of M-Day, where Scarlet Witch betrayed her race, mutants, because she was still a mutant at the time, by magically eliminating the mutant gene, causing hundreds of thousands of premature ends, again because she was overcome with the grief of loss. This is something that she is still working to remedy to this day. And finally, DC's Identity Crisis. The Identity Crisis storyline caused so many problems I can't believe they were ever even able to find the pieces to put them back together again. The crisis began when beloved character Sue Dibney, the wife of Elongated Man, was found brutally eliminated. The Justice League begins working to find the culprit. The biggest and most damaging reveal is that the villain Dr. Light, years before this story, had intimately harmed Sue. Dr. Light as a villain to us, like before that, was pretty goofy, so it seems strange that he would do something like that. It turns out that he was actually once quite intelligent and violent, but then because of that incident, Zatanna, after a vote involving some League members, decided to wipe his memory and alter his personality magically to make him less of a threat. He wouldn't be as violent anymore, he wouldn't know the hero's personal information or go after their families. Batman fought against the altering, believing that no one should have their being messed with like that, so after another vote, the group there decided to also have Batman's memory wiped, but only for like the last 10 minutes. Now, Batman doesn't remember anything, Dr. Light is neutralized, and it should be done. But of course, during Identity Crisis, Dr. Light gets his memories back, and then Batman eventually realizes how the team betrayed him, and that causes him to be distrustful towards everybody, and then it's revealed that the small group voted to alter the personalities of other villains like Catwoman, and it was a slippery slope from there that led to a lot of guilt and a lot of pain. Regarding the fallout from Identity Crisis as a whole, Tim Drake loses his father, Firestorm explodes, and Adam's ex-wife is revealed to have betrayed his trust and stolen his technology to end Sue. To this day, this story is one of the most controversial things that DC has ever done.
Number 10, Spider-Woman. This betrayal is a little more subtle, but it definitely led to some trouble for both characters down the line, so I think it's an important one to mention still. Jessica Drew was in Madripoor with her friend Lindsay and Patch, aka Wolverine. She knew he was Wolverine, and he knew she knew at this point, I believe, but he still went by the alias of Patch because Logan thought he was being oh so sneaky, and he didn't want the world to know that the X-Men were actually alive at the time, even though I feel like anyone that met Patch probably knew. it was Wolverine. Jessica had decided to take up a job as the Prince of Madripoor, Prince Baran's bodyguard, but Patch thought it was a bad idea because Baran was a bad guy. At the same time, Jessica was giving Patch grief for working his muscle and getting involved with Tiger, a powerful crime boss in Madripoor. Both felt the other was betraying their own sense of morals and thereby betraying their friendship, so it was kind of a two-way betrayal in these characters' eyes. In the end, Patch was right to criticize Prince Baran as Jessica ended up near death after stumbling upon the Lazarus Project during her shift in the palace and barely escaping with her life. Patch likewise would have a trial ahead as he wrestled with the mysterious Lazarus Project, but he'd forgive Jessica when he found her and help her to get to safety and get much needed medical attention. She was pretty messed up. Don't you hate when that happens? Don't you hate when you stumble upon mysterious projects and then you just get like thrown into a sewer because you're like in such a terrible condition? I know I do. Number 9. Gambit. In this case, Gambit wasn't entirely in control of himself. He was under the influence of the Shadow King, who had possessed him and made him fight against Logan. Wolverine happened to be the one to face off with him. He managed to get the drop on Gambit, defeating him in battle when Wolverine successfully pinned him down. This all happened too after Wolverine had been cut off from the rest of those X-Men who were not influenced by Shadow King, but as Wolverine said while Gambit was busy throwing insults his way, he is one of the best when it comes to winning fights. And regardless of being cut off from support, that is exactly what happened here. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear about more superheroes who have been betrayed, oh no, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Wolverine. Laura Kinney, formerly known as X-23, and Logan have quite the complex past. Laura is basically a genetic female counterpart to Wolverine. Some consider her a clone, and some consider her more a genetic offspring, kind of like Logan's daughter. In reality, she's kind of both, to be honest. When Logan first came across Laura, he realized that she had been brainwashed and wasn't in control of her actions. Able to sympathize, he did his best to free her. She was supposed to go straight to the X-Men basically, but decided to venture out on her own instead, which resulted in her getting in a fight again with Logan next time that he ran into her. However, he was able to not only defeat Laura this time, but also basically talk her down and bring her back with him to the Xavier Institute, helping her to find a home among the X-Men. And now the two are very close, and I don't think Laura would even consider fighting Logan again unless she had like absolutely no other choice, like if he turned evil or some such thing. But then honestly, she wouldn't be betraying him really because the Logan she knew would probably like want her to take him out. I feel like he's also the type of guy that's kind of like, you know, I've lived a long life, like I'm kind of fine, but I guess I gotta keep living, bub. Number 7. Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde didn't intend to betray Wolverine. It wasn't really her choice at all. She was brainwashed into doing it by Wolverine's longtime rival and old teacher, Ogun. Ogun was looking to get revenge on Wolverine, and so psychically uploaded a bunch of awesome ninja and martial arts skills to Kitty Pryde's mind, and then sent her to assassinate her mentor, friend, and fellow X-Men, Wolverine. Fortunately, the bond between Logan and Kate was so strong that they were able to work together to defeat Ogun in the end, freeing Kitty but leaving her with an experience which had changed her forever. She returned to X-Men a little more mature and definitely more of a badass. I think she still has all of that like assassin knowledge in her brain as well, taking up the new name for herself for a time at least of Shadowcat. Yeah, it was really more Ogun than Kitty betraying, but even if she was being controlled, it was still her own physical form fighting against Wolverine. And this is a cool story that I just enjoy revisiting, so I saw an opportunity to put it on this list and I was like, I'm gonna do it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Number 6. Mariko. Mariko Yoshida was one of the major loves of Wolverine's life. The two were even engaged to be married, but Mariko, being the good person that she was, wanted to make sure that her family no longer had any criminal ties before the wedding happened, as she was now the head of Clan Yoshida. Unfortunately, before they could get married, Mariko died during her attempt to broker peace between the rival criminal gangs. She ended up going to Hell and would later meet Wolverine there when he was sent to Hell by the Right Red Hand. Or at least, his soul was sent there. His physical form was still on Earth, but it's a whole story. While his soul was there, his suffering would manifest in him being tormented by Mariko, his former love. She didn't want to torment Wolverine, but she pretty much had no choice. Despite this, Wolverine, when he escaped, came back and tried to free her, but Mariko believed she deserved what she got and chose to stay in hell, refusing to let him save her. I think she felt pretty bad because she was like, I feel like I betrayed you, and also I got stuff to atone for, you know?
Finally, a time for Marvel Comics. Not just characters who use Marvel in their name. Warren Worthington III was one of the original 5 X-Men, going by the superhero name Angel because of his huge and amazing, beautiful wings that allowed him to fly. But when he moved to the X-Force team, things went a little downhill. Thanks to a crossover event called the Mutant Massacre, Warren's wings were mutilated by the mutant Harpoon. Each wing was impaled, causing them to become infected and eventually even amputated. Warren was absolutely devastated, and at his weakest moment, the incredibly powerful villain Apocalypse showed up to kinda save the day. Apocalypse offered to restore Warren's wings on the condition that Angel would now serve as his horseman Death. Warren, being completely lost, agreed, and he became Archangel, the lead horseman. Now, knowing all their tactics and all their weaknesses, Archangel beat all of the X-Men in battle way too easily. Eventually, fellow mutant Iceman helped him to recover his heroic side again, but this change endured, and the Archangel persona has been a huge part of Warren's character ever since, with him battling with his darker persona and eventually learning how to control and harness it. Now, back to DC Comics and Black Adam. Black Adam has 2 things he seems to be really good at: taking people's lives and manipulating people. We already talked about Mary Marvel, but when Black Adam joined up with the Justice Society after betraying the Injustice Society, he and the other heavy hitter from the team, Atom Smasher, started out as pretty antagonistic towards each other. Atom Smasher did not trust Black Adam. Rightfully so, and Atom thought that Atom Smasher was childish and weak. However, after working together to escape the supervillain gambling establishment, the House, they gained a new kind of respect for each other. After Atom found out that Atom Smasher had taken the life of Extant to save his own mother, he saw him as a kind of kindred spirit, a fellow life taker. How quaint. Teth Adam started pushing Atom Smasher into becoming a killer just like himself, trying to convince the young hero that that was how heroes should act. He manipulated Atom Smasher, and it worked really well as Smasher left the Justice Society to join up with Black Adam. And here we are, back at Marvel again. The ninja clan known as the Hand has had many run-ins with different heroes over the years, but none of those heroes have had as much interaction with the shadowy group of ninjas as Daredevil. His mentor Stick and his sometimes girlfriend Elektra have history with the clan, and he's never been particularly fond of them. But when he seemed to secure control over the clan, he decided to put their skills to good use. He moved them to Hell's Kitchen and set up a headquarters and prison known as Shadowland. He changed the Hand into what he thought was a force for good, but as his time with the Hand went on, he seemed to be the one who was changing, becoming more and more aggressive and drastic with his methods of crime fighting. He started to butt heads with other heroes and even became responsible for the passing of his adversary, Bullseye. It turns out that this brutal new Daredevil was actually being possessed by an ancient demon called the Beast, who is the source of the Hand's mystical powers and their pretty dubious ways. Daredevil was secretly manipulated by a small faction of the Hand that worshipped the Beast, called the Snake Root, into undergoing the Ritual of the Black Flower. Basically, the culmination of that ritual came when Daredevil took the life of Bullseye. This completed the ritual and allowed the Beast to fully possess him and corrupt the people of Hell's Kitchen until Iron Fist exorcised the demon from Matt Murdock. Now, thanks to the MCU, many fans now see the insectoid alien known as Meek as a fun, little, cute grub creature who sometimes gets a robotic body with a bunch of swords. That's cool, but comic book Meek? Completely different character. I mean, for starters, he actually does something for the story. But after Hulk landed on Sakaar after being banished by the Illuminati, he befriends Meek alongside the other Warbound. Now, having Hulk around inspired Meek to break out of his shell. The problem came when Meek saw the Hulk becoming peaceful. This was just unacceptable for Meek, and he wanted to bring his green scar back. So what does he do? Instead of telling the Hulk that his Earth ship was sabotaged by rebels on the planet Sakaar, Meek just lets it explode, wiping Hulk's wife off the face of the planet while also decimating Sakaar, the Hulk's new home. Meek lets the blame be pinned on the Illuminati back on Earth, and this brought the Green Scar back, but even more than that, it brought World War Hulk, where the Hulk literally wipes the floor with almost all the superheroes and even some of the villains, and then, just when that conflict is about to end, Meek just can't handle it and he causes the passing of Rick Jones, Banner's closest friend, and that causes the near destruction of the entire Earth. And finally, in for our last spot today, we're going to Marvel's Ultimate Universe. Shortly after Iron Man joined the S.H.I.E.L.D.-sponsored Ultimates team, he and Natalia Romanova, the Black Widow, struck up their relationship, and it went so far that the two eventually got engaged, with Tony even giving Black Widow her own nanite-controlled suit of armor, which did look actually very cool, just so you know. But the happy couple did not last too long, as it turned out that Natalia was actually a traitor working for the Liberators, a group of heroes from around the globe who were opposed to the amount of power held by the United States thanks to S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Ultimates. After it was revealed that she was a traitor, she organized the assassination of her longtime Black Ops partner Hawkeye's entire family, even personally taking out his son Callum. Then she turned on Tony Stark and she managed to end the life of his longtime butler and close friend, Jarvis. So, needless to say, it didn't feel so bad when Tony used the nanites inside of Natalia's body, the ones used to control that fancy new armor, to paralyze her and steal information from her brain about the Liberators and her entire betrayal. He then knocks her unconscious with a wine bottle, giving her brain damage. Her story finally fully came to a close when Clint Barton puts an arrow between her eyes in Ultimates 2's final chapter, getting his revenge on this super traitorous Black Widow.
Comes to what a betrayal feels like. Sometimes the feeling of a betrayal is more personal than that, and it just comes from a rift between friends and colleagues, like during the first Civil War. While I'm sure both Captain America and Iron Man felt betrayed by each other, it really just came down to a matter of opinion when readers took sides in this conflict. Iron Man felt Captain America had betrayed him and the team by rebelling against what his plan was for superheroes in the future, whereas Captain America felt Iron Man had betrayed the team, all other supers, and the world by forcing them to go public and join the Superhuman Registration Act efforts, or else risk basically being persecuted as a criminal. What side of the conflict were you on and why? I personally was on Cap's side in this conflict, feeling that Tony had betrayed his friends, condemning them if they refused to join his efforts, which I think is also pretty clear in the fact of how I even outlined that conflict. I was like, Cap feels betrayed because the whole world is being betrayed, and I was like, you know, Tony's like, I got a plan, but no one's going with it. I don't really like that. I don't really like that you're not going with my plan, Cap. Oh boy, of course we have to talk about this next one. We gotta talk about The Crossing. One of the most shocking betrayals due to the period of comic book history in which it took place. The Crossing took place during a time when continuity wasn't quite as nailed down. A lot of the surprise reveals and twists and turns of this event feel like they kind of come out of nowhere somewhat, which is also because they kind of do. Things that happened previous to this event, as well as moments even within the event, seem to contradict the event itself. The whole idea, though, behind The Crossing, or what kicked it off anyway, was the idea that there was a traitor amidst the Avengers. This turned out to be Iron Man, of all people, who was only acting evil because he had apparently this whole time been a sleeper agent of the villain Immortus, an alternate timeline version of Kang the Conqueror. There are also moments when he even seems to forget this, even though this is revealed, and it's a weird event. Also, everyone looks crazy for it. This next one, I really like this betrayal actually, because I didn't see it coming till it was too late. Just like the Avengers did as well. We're talking about the Empire event, which if you haven't read, I would actually recommend checking it out. Overall, I thought it was a cool alien space invasion type of event. Now, was it the best event I have ever read? Well, probably not, but it was a really fun read with some cool twists and turns and character development sprinkled throughout, and just a lot of things that I wasn't expecting, and then they happened and I was like, this is cool. A lot of good team-ups too. It also had a really strong lead-up in my opinion. During Empire, the Avengers are betrayed by an alien race they once considered their friends, the Kotati. Specifically, the consciousness of previous Avengers member, Swordsman, who after his death was brought back as a Kotati. This Kotati is not him, but was given all of his memories leading up to his death, his consciousness, and also has his appearance. At first, it seems the Kotati and Sequoia, who is like basically their leader and like their messiah, are fighting back against the Kree-Skrull Alliance to protect Earth, but it's quickly revealed that the Kotati are in fact the villains who want to conquer Earth and actually the cosmos in revenge for past transgressions against them. And in turn, the Alliance is actually looking to stop the Kotati from taking over the entire universe. So we start off the event thinking the Alliance are the bad guys and the Kotati are the good guys. The reveal is the opposite. Woo! It also comes at a time when like the Avengers are basically right there with the Kotati, and then they're like, by the way, we're gonna actually like kinda kill you all, and also She-Hulk's dead. Don't worry, she's fine. She-Hulk's fine. But it was pretty shocking during that event. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe we'll never see her again. They got me. They got me right here in the heart. I feel like I was actually betrayed by this next one. But if we're going to talk about Civil War, I feel like it's only fair to mention the second one as well. In this war though, I felt that there was a very clear single betrayer. There was a good side and a bad side, and tragically the bad side for this one was Carol Danvers. While this was supposed to be a second Civil War to divide readers again, for the most part Civil War II just turned the whole comic book community against Carol, villainizing her in what felt like straight up character assassination to me, as a Carol fan. Carol comes across Ulysses, an Inhuman with the power to see into the future. Now she wants to use his visions as, you know, something that they can use to predict bad things that will happen, and later as justification for capturing and punishing people who may, in the future, become a threat, with said visions basically being used as proof of that. Or we should say potential proof, as well some of Ulysses' visions do come true, not all would. Carol is pushed to this extreme by the loss of Rhodey, her love, War Machine, at the hands of Thanos. This creates a split in the Avengers, with Iron Man actually being the voice of reason this time around and leading the opposing side to Carol. Another unexpected betrayal, probably the most unexpected one that divided readers everywhere. Not even divided, just really upset everyone everywhere, whether you were reading comics or not. This one comes from a core member of the Avengers team. One of the best, Captain America. How could he do it? How could he betray the Avengers in the world? In fact, this betrayal was, like I said, so upsetting, it caused a ripple even outside of the comic book community. And within the community, it actually prompted some people to swear off Marvel Comics for good, although I'm sure they came back after this whole thing was resolved. That's how much though they disliked the reveal that Captain America had been a sleeper agent for Hydra all along. Hail Hydra. How was this possible? Simple. This wasn't our Cap, but instead was a reality-warped alternate created by a sentient manifestation of the cosmic cube known as Kobik, who had been manipulated into doing this by Red Skull. That has to be one of the most comic book sentences I've ever read.
When we call someone a villain, it comes with the assumption that maybe you shouldn't trust this guy. Yet for some reason, people keep trusting villains, and the villains in turn keep betraying them. And a great example of that scenario comes from Invincible. David Anders, aka Dinosaurus, appearing in the Invincible comic book series is an interesting villain. While he does incredibly evil things, he is genuinely trying to save the world and the human race from climate change and the fact that we are destroying our own planet and resources. That just got very real. Following in the logic of the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few, he has done some truly awful things, like destroying the entirety of Las Vegas. But still, Invincible saw the good in this villain, and he decided to team up with him anyways. Unfortunately, that was a mistake. From Invincible issue 98 to 100, we got an event called The Death of Everyone. Mark had been affected by the Scourge virus and had temporarily lost his powers, and because of that, Dinosaurus took things into his own hands, distracting Invincible and the heroes with devices in Los Angeles that caused earthquakes, while his real plan was to detonate devices all over Greenland, melting the ice and leading to a massive rise in sea level, wiping out thousands of people living in the world's coast coastal cities. It's hard because on one hand you can understand why Mark would trust this villain, but on the other hand, you're like, dude, you really should have known better. As some of you loyal nerds may know, this next spot is one of my favorite moments in comic books. So to preface, in Marvel Comics, Magneto and the Red Skull should not be allowed in the same room. Given each other's past, especially at the time of World War II with Red Skull working German forces, and Magneto and his family being victims of one of the worst atrocities mankind has ever committed, perpetrated by the very group that Red Skull was a prominent part of, it's safe to say that these two wouldn't ever work together. But that's not actually the case. In Acts of Vengeance from 1989, Doctor Doom, Kingpin, Wizard, Mandarin, Magneto, and the Red Skull were all temporarily united by Loki in a common goal, which isn't really relevant to this point. What is relevant is that Magneto was pretty unsure whether or not this was the same Red Skull that aided Germany in the slaughter of his people, or if it was someone just using the Red Skull name and look. So Magneto just straight up asked him. Yes, this was the same Red Skull, and he even compared Magneto's own crimes to that of Red Skull's short mustached leader in World War II, and that was dumb. Magneto almost instantly turned on and overpowered his fellow villain. Magneto doesn't just end him though. No. He instead leaves the Red Skull in a stripped down fallout shelter 20 feet underground with no ladder to reach a patch, 10 gallons of water, no food, no light, just oxygen and his own thought. Magneto and the Red Skull are iconic, but no one is as iconic as Doctor Doom. In the beginning of his comic book life, Doom wanted nothing more than to save his mom from the hold of Mephisto. Once a year, every single year, Doom would challenge Mephisto for the fate of his mother's soul, but he almost always lost until 1989 when he teamed up with Doctor Strange in Triumph and Torment. Shortly after their arrival in Hell, the Doctors began to realize that they don't stand a chance at winning at all. When the two became separated, Mephisto makes Doom an offer. Doctor Strange's soul in exchange for his mother's, a deal that Doom accepts. Doctor Doom captures Strange and goes to complete the deal, but after Doom's mom became so offended that her son would sell the Sorcerer Supreme just to save her soul, she refused to be freed, and that's when Doctor Doom's real plan could kick in. Thanks to his mother's pure act and a gadget that Doom slipped into Doctor Strange's cloak, the Sorcerer Supreme was able to use the power of Cynthia Von Doom's pure act to wound Mephisto and free both himself and Victor's mom, and the three of them escaped. Doom did like a double betrayal, tricking Mephisto, who is the master of tricking people. It's awesome. But if we are going to talk about Doctor Doom, he actually had a moment where he betrayed the entire villain community as a whole, when his morality switched and he donned a highly advanced suit of Iron Man's Model Prime Mark 51 armor, painted it gray, green, and light blue, and became infamous Iron Man. This was absolutely awesome, and his costume is still one of the coldest Iron Man and Doctor Doom looks I have ever seen. His power was almost unmatched, with Von Doom's sorcery being mixed with the technology and arsenal of Iron Man. He was a force to be reckoned with, but it wasn't just that. Doom had spent years as one of the biggest bad guys around, and he had intricate knowledge of the criminal underworld, and he absolutely used it. A group of villains were all gathered together to figure out what the heck they were gonna do now that Doom had switched sides. That's when Doom just busts in through the roof and takes them all down. Heavy hitters like the Wizard, the Wrecking Crew, the Hood, and Jigsaw all went down in one go. Now switching over to DC Comics for this one of the main goals of the New 52 was to show the same old popular heroes in a new light for younger readers and to help make these awesome characters easier to get into. But it also had the benefit of introducing a few new characters entirely, like Atomica. Atomica was essentially a female version of the Atom, and she worked directly with the Justice League for some time, but simultaneously she was working for two other factions entirely. As the Justice League became a more and more powerful group and a seeming threat to the world, Atomica was reluctantly recruited by Amanda Waller to bring the team of heroes down. Now, you may be thinking, okay, but this is a list of villain betrayals. Indeed, you are correct. And it was later revealed that Atomica actually hailed from Earth 3, the home of the crime syndicate of America, and Atomica was very much a part of that team of villains from the get-go. She was never actually a hero. After instigating Trinity War by stabbing a shard of kryptonite into Superman's brain, Atomica then allowed the outsider, Earth 3's Alfred Pennyworth, to summon the crime syndicate, reuniting her with Johnny Quick, her lover. Thankfully, while the Justice League got completely clobbered, the villains of the main DC Avengers universe at the time stepped up to the heroic plate, and Atomica got squashed like a bug by Lex Luthor. Number 5. Terra of the Teen Titans. The Judas Contract is definitely the most popular and definitive new Teen Titans story to date, and it includes a gutting betrayal that I would be remiss to not talk about. In New Teen Titans number 26, we are introduced to Tara Markov, who was a young girl who joined the team. Now it turns out that Tara had actually infiltrated the team following orders from none other than their nemesis, Deathstroke the Terminator. Tara, being brainwashed, dismantled the team from the inside, and it completely wrecked the Titans. She and Deathstroke were eventually foiled by intervention from Deathstroke's son, Jericho, and Dick Grayson in his first outing as Nightwing, with Tara passing away at the story's conclusion, having brought down a building around herself in a blind rampage. The Titans still honor her with a statue and with the name being passed on to other heroes, but goodness gracious was this story fantastic and the betrayal deep and rooted. Number 4. Bishop Messiah Complex. Bishop's betrayal of the X-Men during 2007's Messiah Complex revealed how far the time-displaced mutant is willing to go to change the future for the better. Bishop comes from a dark future where mutants and humanity had eventually gone to war, and he eventually ended up trapped in the present. He became an X-Man and he served on a number of teams off and on over the years, even being Professor X's personal bodyguard, and he was just incredibly popular. After decimation depowered almost all mutants on Earth, the birth of Hope Summers signaled hope for the mutants, as she was the first mutant born since the decimation, and she was an incredibly powerful one too. But Bishop's past came back to haunt him, convincing him that Hope was the cause of the dark future that he lived in. He betrayed the X-Men and planned to take out Hope before she could grow up and change the world forever. He set off nano sentinels within the one Sentinel squad, taking down the human pilots and pitting the Sentinels against the X-Men. He then ambushed Forge in the chaos, laying a trap to capture Cable, who was protecting Hope, and end Hope's life. But by the end of the event, Bishop had to flee the X-Men after firing on Hope and instead accidentally striking and nearly killing Charles Xavier. Number 3. Cyclops. During the Avengers vs. X-Men event, Cyclops became a host for the Phoenix Force alongside 4 other mutants. Possessed by the Phoenix, Cyclops actually de-lifed Professor Xavier, which was a huge betrayal, as for a long time Cyclops was Professor X's golden boy, and Professor X was like his father. As arrogant and manipulative as Charles Francis Xavier was, no one doubted his dedication to the cause or his love for his students, especially Scott. But his motivation for doing it was a bit more of just being a villain than anything else. But it was only Xavier whose life was lost, and he's died like 8 times, so it's not the biggest loss in the world. Afterwards though, Cyclops adopted a more revolutionary attitude, leading a rebellious team of X-Men and creating some way more compelling X-Men stories to boot. Number 2. Hal Jordan. Going with the theme of characters who are possessed or mind controlled to make them switch up their morals and ways of thinking, Hal Jordan's turn to the dark side is probably one of the most famous of those. Hal Jordan was probably the greatest Green Lantern, according to the comics at least, but in the 90s that changed. After the death of Superman and the subsequent reign of the Supermen, Coast City, Hal Jordan's home, was destroyed. This completely changed the Lantern, and he even tried using his power ring to try and revive the city, which was against the rules. When the Guardians of the Universe tried to stop him, he snapped. He went off the handle, ending the lives of every Green Lantern and snapping Sinestro's neck. Hal named himself Parallax, and he became a threat to the whole DC universe for like a decade before sacrificing himself. Hal eventually did come back in 2004's Green Lantern Rebirth, with Parallax being retconned as the primal entity of fear that was trapped in the central power battery and eventually corrupted Hal. And in at number 1 is Captain America in Secret Empire. To call this betrayal, the one within the Secret Empire storyline, controversial would be a bit of an understatement. The reveal of Captain America as a longtime Hydra agent completely took readers by surprise, and even a bit of anger. His vast history of being the one to do the right thing suddenly meant very little. It even caused Marvel to be like, hold up, we were just kidding, he was manipulated by the Cosmic Cube, don't worry, it's all good. So basically, what happened is that Steve Rogers revealed himself as a Hydra defector. He allied himself with a new Madam Hydra, took advantage of a global catastrophe to seize control of the world's governments, and helped Hydra make its move. Hydra, who had seriously infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., began assuming control of key locations and executing any who stood in their way, including Cap personally taking out Rick Jones, a shot that left fans and characters alike reeling and shocked. It was not a great time, but it did lead to the awesome Hydra had infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. thing in the MCU's Winter Soldier movie, so not a complete loss.
There is no drama quite like what happens in comic books. Today we are counting down the betrayals that ripped apart teams, shook the foundations of universes, and in some cases changed the course of comics history. Number 10, Mr. Sinister and the Resurrection Protocols. The betrayal of Mr. Sinister taking over Krakoa stands as one of the most shocking twists in recent X-Men history. From the beginning of Mutant Kind's new era on Krakoa, Sinister was brought into the Quiet Council for his unparalleled expertise in genetics and cloning, which is essential for the creation of the Resurrection Protocols. However, beneath his apparent cooperation, Sinister was secretly manipulating events by implanting his own DNA into the resurrected mutants to attempt to seize control, which is insane. While Krakoa was meant to be a sanctuary and a fresh start for mutants, Sinister turned it into a stage for his own ambitions. This also extra stung because he did this right after like the worst thing that ever happened to mutants took place. Like, they are simply just trying to resurrect their friends, their family, and partners after they were prematurely taken from the world, and you are out here pulling this buffoonery? Please get a grip, Mr. Sinister. Number 9, a death in the family. Jason Todd wasn't just betrayed by his own mother, but also by DC fans. In the famous story where the Joker eliminates the second Robin, Jason Todd, the blame rests on more people than just the lunatic with green hair. Jason's own mother, the mother that he crossed oceans to track down just because he desperately wanted to meet her, betrayed him and sold him out to the Joker, and he still tried to save her after. But Jason's life didn't actually rest in the hands of his mom or the Joker, it was in the hands of DC fans. People didn't really like Jason as Robin. I mean, like, Dick Grayson is a tough act to follow. Some people also thought that Jason was just annoying and he was getting a lot of complaints, so DC ran a telephone poll for the fate of Todd. Fans could vote that either he survives or he doesn't. In the end, 72 votes was the difference between life and death. Yeah, poor Jason was betrayed across the board, and honestly, in this equation, I would argue the only person that didn't betray Jason is the Joker. What the Joker did was actually completely in character for him. Number 8, Sharon Carter attacking Steve Rogers. The betrayal of Sharon Carter attacking Steve Rogers with a bullet at the end of Civil War in 2006 was quite a shock. After the intense ideological conflict that tore apart the superhero community, Steve Rogers, or Captain America, surrenders and stands trial due to his opposition of the Superhero Registration Act, only to be eliminated on the courthouse steps by Sharon Carter, one of Steve's closest allies and romantic partner. It turns out that she was manipulated into pulling the trigger, but still. The act of betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, as it came from someone that Steve trusted implicitly, amplifying the tragedy on his end. Sharon's coerced behavior is remembered as one of the most heartbreaking betrayals in the Marvel Universe, forever altering the legacy of both of those characters and leading to many major story arcs after. Number 7, Batman's contingency plans. Batman's contingencies for every member of the Justice League are one of the most controversial things that the Bat has ever done, which is saying something. The discovery of these plans led to the Bat's expulsion from the League and years of distrust between him and the other heroes, and actually, I can see both sides here. On Batman's end, he's the human when placed beside some of his JLA teammates. Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Aquaman, and the list goes on. Their powers are scary if the hero goes rogue. We saw the devastating effects of a heartbroken Superman in Injustice. The Flash once broke the timeline that led to Flashpoint Wonder Woman that was ruthless and borderline completely evil, and Aquaman once had his own plans devised to take down the surface world should they ever pick a battle with Atlantis that resulted in Metropolis, Gotham City, and more flooded and hundreds hurt or worse. So I can understand if Batman wanted to be a little bit prepared just in case someone went off the rails on their own or went under mind control, especially since he himself is more vulnerable than any of them, considering he's a human at the end of the day. But on the other hand, it would hurt if Say, you found out that your friend, your teammate that you're supposed to be able to trust with anything, has detailed the most effective way to subdue you, but you only found out after those plans were stolen by an evil maniac that used them against all of you. That would be really awful. Or say if the person that made those plans went insane himself and became, I don't know, the Batman who laughs and then used those plans to destroy the team. The League was split, but it seems that things could have at least been made a little bit better if Batman had just told the League that he had the plans at all. Number 6. Cyclops ending Professor X. Cyclops eliminating his mentor, his father figure, Professor Xavier, was crazy. For years, Scott Summers, better known as, well, Cyclops, was seen as the natural successor to Xavier's vision of peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants, many considering them to be more father and son than anything else. This trust was shattered during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men in 2012, when Cyclops, corrupted by the immense power of the Phoenix Force, ultimately eliminated Xavier as the Professor tried to intervene and stop him. The act was not just a personal tragedy, but a seismic moment for the X-Men, marking Cyclops' fall from grace and forever altering the direction of mutant kind. The betrayal was so impactful because it came from someone who had been Xavier's most loyal student and son, making the moment both heartbreaking and pretty unforgettable in the Marvel Universe. Number 5. Evil Tony Stark. Tony Stark betrayed the Avengers, financially decimating teammates and eliminated their loved ones, and nobody even knew he was doing it because he technically wasn't. Back in the experimental era of comics, which is the 90s, Tony Stark systematically began ripping the Avengers apart, subtly at first and then graduating to the more lethal methods. Turns out, he was a sleeper agent for Kang the Conqueror. We don't really know how long Tony had been under Kang's control. Some people think it's been since the Avengers were formed, but really it didn't become a problem until Avengers Crossing. The Avengers discovered that they were betrayed by their own teammate, and to solve that problem, they decided to go back in time and get a Tony that will for sure not be evil yet, which is teenage Tony. In the end, adult Tony realizes that being a villain is bad and sacrifices himself to save the day, leaving the present day with a teenage Iron Man. We don't get the regular, adult Iron Man back until a bit later. I think it's when Franklin Richards revives everyone, but yeah, this was crazy. It wasn't explained really how Tony was helping Kang all those years, and apparently later on Kang was just like, I just want to create confusion, and mission accomplished.
Number 5. Scarlet Witch. As much as I hate to include someone like Wanda on this list, it kinda has to be mentioned that she technically betrayed all of mutant kind with decimation and M-Day. Of course, I will still argue that this really only happened because Wanda's mental health was often shafted in her past, and so her kinda snapping after House of M made a whole lot of sense. While Wolverine was still Wolverine, there were a lot of mutants, and I mean a lot, that were affected. The whole community felt this blow, and Wolverine was part of that community, so even though he still had his powers, he was still hurting a lot, I think. I think a lot of mutants were. Also, he was one of the first people to realize what had happened in the House of M reality, and he was not too happy to have a fabricated life made for him and be denied the reality and history that were true to him, no matter how bleak or painful in comparison to the world Wanda had made for him and everyone in an effort to try to make herself, her family, and pretty much all other supers happy. I love how Wanda's like, I just want to give everyone a reality where we can all be happy, you know? And everyone's like, how dare you? How dare you try to make me happy? Obviously, I feel very bad for Wanda, I think you can tell. Number 4. Professor X. Oh, bub. Professor X for being the head of the Xavier Institute and for being a leader among his own X-Men team who claims to stand for mutant and human harmony and preaches about what it means to be good and be a hero and fight for all of humanity united, has a lot, and I mean a lot, of skeletons in his closet. He has betrayed the X-Men multiple times, Wolverine included. I think mainly this has to do with Professor X choosing to suppress as opposed to acknowledge and deal with his darker side. He put his team in danger when it was revealed that Danger Room was actually sentient and itself a living AI mutant who then pursued the team in an effort to get to Xavier, and also technically came equipped with knowledge on all their weaknesses, by the way. Danger Room is scary. Or just Danger, sorry. Just Danger, that's what the mutant version of Danger Room is called. Additionally, Xavier's repressed negative emotions and his severe punishment of Magneto was what led to the creation of the psychic entity known as Onslaught, which was sort of a blend between those two psyches. You could also argue that even in modern comics, Wolverine has felt betrayed by Professor X. When X chose to allow all mutant villains to come to Krakoa and call it their home, Wolverine was one of the few people to protest, thinking it was a bad idea that would inevitably backfire. I guess we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Although I feel like based on Inferno, Wolverine may have been right here. Number 3. Hulk. The Hulk has always been a rival of Wolverine's, despite the fact that both of them are heroes. In fact, Wolverine made his first appearance in Incredible Hulk issue 180, where he fought against him. Hulk has dropped in to fight Wolverine a few times in the comics, and sometimes does so just to prove that I guess he's the strongest between them. Although it doesn't always end that way. In fact, quite a few times their fights have actually ended more in a tie than anything. Some of Hulk's other personas, like Joe Fixit, have also gotten involved with Wolverine, and even when Fixit has meant well, there is an animosity between these two that generally leads to Fixit causing more trouble for Logan during their adventures. This is usually because they each have their own approach to dealing with problems and with baddies. Although, I guess, to be fair, it seems that the Hulk usually also feels betrayed, which is what leads to their fighting. But even the slightest thing can set him off, so these betrayals are usually just from some small remark that Wolverine has made. So in the end, I always feel like Wolverine is more betrayed by the Hulk because he's just said something offhand, and then the Hulk's like, now we have to fight. It's like, whoa. Breathe, it's okay. Number 2, Magneto. Sure, Magneto was a villain when this one happened, but he also joined up with the X-Men only to turn on them later, and vice versa. It's happened a lot. Magneto might, in general, be thought of as a villain because of his iconic classic appearances in the Fox X-Men films, as well as the X-Men 90s animated series and in the classic comics, but he's really more complex than just being a villain. In fact, currently in the comics, he's more of a hero, I'd say. However, that doesn't change his history with Wolverine, who is understandably a little less likely to trust former villains turned heroes because of history like this. Magneto is the one responsible for ripping the adamantium right out of Wolverine's skeleton back in the day, which was insanely painful and left Wolverine in a more feral state for a good long period in the comics. He also lost his nose because of this, and this all went down after Magneto had been acting more heroically in the comics, working with the X-Men on behalf of Charles Xavier in his absence. In fact, Magneto was the leader of the X-Men then, so if you want to be but he's a villain, he was definitely a hero and then he went back to being a villain. He felt like other people were betraying him. The tension between the two characters has remained ever since, and even shows up in the current X books, despite them both residing in harmony on Krakoa. Magneto only ranks a little lower here because he is so iconically a villain in many folks' minds still, but to me, he's a hero. Number 1, Cyclops. Cyclops has betrayed Wolverine multiple times in the comics. Probably one of the biggest betrayals happened either when the two couldn't agree and so created their own X-Men teams, separate from one another, each believing their view on young mutants and how to train and teach them was superior, or when Cyclops recruited Wolverine's female clone / genetic daughter onto the Black Ops mutant team X-Force against his wishes. Laura, aka X-23, aka now Wolverine, had just recently escaped those who saw her only as a weapon and a tool to be used, a deadly killing machine, which was exactly why Wolverine did not want her on the X-Force team. But Cyclops saw how useful she could be and felt that if she was willing to join, then it didn't really matter what Logan thought. Wolverine evidently disagreed with his outlook. He disagreed quite strongly.
Superheroes are the good guys, but they are human, and every human has a dark side. Not trying to get too deep with you all, but some superheroes let the dark side come out and betray everybody. And a great example of that would be Kid Marvel-Man. Now some of you may be aware of Marvel-Man, some of you may not. Essentially, he's an old superhero who is roughly the British equivalent of Captain Marvel, aka Shazam from the DC universe. Michael Moran had the ability to transform into a superpowered hero by saying the word Marvel Man. Now for a while some legal issues made it Miracle Man, but you get the point. Like Billy Batson, Moran had a sidekick, Johnny Bates, who by saying his magic word transformed into Kid Marvel Man. These two and their whole super family, including Marvel Woman, were sidelined for almost 20 years after a big long comic book run, with the heroes resurfacing in 1982 under Alan Moore. As part of that revival, Marvel Man and Kid Marvel Man were part of a secret government program and were attacked with a nuke. Now, they both survived, but Marvel Man now had no memory of his superhero alter ego. Kid Marvel Man, on the other hand, believed he was the only survivor and decided never to return to his child form ever again, growing into a superpowered adult. This allowed him to grow his powers enormously, but his disillusionment at being alone in the world and the power he now had turned him into a complete psychopath. Kid Marvel Man went on a rampage, attacking and destroying almost the whole of London City and wiping out most of the population, and he never got to redeem himself because he was defeated and completely wiped out by his former mentor for being too dangerous to be kept alive. Switching over to DC Comics here though, with another Marvel, funnily enough, Mary Marvel has long been considered one of DC Comics' most wholesome characters, being one of the best members of the DC's Shazam family. But after losing her powers in the trials of Shazam, Mary later encountered Black Adam. At this point in time, Black Adam was dealing with his wife's passing, and after realizing that Mary was now powerless, Black Adam decided to imbue her with a portion of his own power, transforming her into a dark, angry version of her former self. Now, going by the name Black Mary, Mary eventually became addicted to dark magic and ended up entangled in the schemes of Darkseid and his evil minion Desaad. Black Adam basically took Shazam's best family member and the most wholesome person around and corrupted her into evil. But sticking with DC here for possibly one of the most infamous betrayals in comics ever. The Judas Contract is definitely the most popular and definitive new Teen Titans story to date, and it includes a gutting betrayal that I would be remiss to not talk about. In New Teen Titans number 26, we are introduced to Tara Markov, a young girl who joined the team. Now, it turns out that Tara had actually infiltrated the team following orders from none other than their nemesis, Deathstroke the Terminator. Tara, being brainwashed, dismantled the team from the inside, and it completely wrecked the Titans. She and Deathstroke were eventually foiled by intervention from Deathstroke's own son, Jericho, and Dick Grayson in his first outing as Nightwing, with Tara passing away at the story's conclusion, having brought down a building around herself in a blind rampage. The Titans still honor her with a statue and with the name being passed on to other heroes, but goodness gracious, was this story fantastic, and the betrayal deep and extremely rooted. For most of Image Comics' Invincible series though, the super genius known as Robot had been a very helpful ally to Invincible and the world at large, and even when he kind of flips to become the final antagonist of the comic, spoiler alert, he still seems to be just trying to help the entire world. But it's always that damn freedom versus security trope. Robot had an overarching plan that he was slowly working towards. All of his actions were in service of his ultimate goal. He got himself a new cloned body, got together with Monster Girl, went off-world with her, overthrew an entire empire and began ruling it, and when he came back is when things went south. He eventually took over the Earth using his robotic drones to do multiple different things at the same time, talking to the Viltrumites, fighting the Earth's superheroes, and meeting with the President, all for the greater good of the Earth and the human species. He was basically trying to create a utopian society. He convinces a lot of people that he is in the right too, but he also does horrible things like crippling Adam Eve, betraying Monster Girl, and manipulating a hell of a lot of people. But switching back to DC Comics, when the Flashpoint universe was created, it gave us a lot of cool and interesting changes to a lot of our favorite DC characters. Possibly one of the most interesting ones was Batman, who in this universe is actually Thomas Wayne, with Bruce Wayne losing his life instead all those years ago, and Martha Wayne actually becoming the Joker. It's twisted and cool, and this Batman has a totally different moral code, being totally fine with bringing criminals to the afterlife, unlike the main universe Bruce Wayne, who refuses to take a life, mostly. Either way, when Thomas Wayne Batman finds out mainline Bruce Wayne becomes the Batman, he deems this unacceptable and tries to change his son's ways. But instead of, being a good father, he teams up with Bane to break Bruce Wayne down. Things got way out of hand in the City of Bane event, which actually eventually ended up with Thomas killing Alfred Pennyworth, which broke everyone. He very clearly regretted his actions, but I don't know, man, you really ain't coming back from that one, for anybody.